I never thought a $6 padlock and a dirt road could bring down $1 million empire, but when the mighty Clarissa Pennington, HOA queen, real estate tyrant, and self-declared guardian of lawn symmetry, stood outside my gate with sweat on her brow and desperation in her voice, begging for access, I knew I'd already won. Funny, isn't it? They tried to fence me in, and I ended up owning the keys to their kingdom. I wish I had a drone and a popcorn machine that morning. If you've ever tangled with an HOA, buckle up, because this story's got chickens, lawyers, a secret water line, and one very poetic fence. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, because this one's gonna hit home. The truth is, I didn't come out here looking for trouble. I came for quiet. After 27 years designing parking garages and overpasses in Houston, I was done watching concrete dry while meetings sucked the soul out of my calendar. When my wife passed, the city felt louder, smaller, and entirely too artificial. So when Uncle Jack left me a modest inheritance, I cashed out, packed up, and went hunting for something with trees. I found it 18 acres of Texas hill country with a creek that made noise only when it wanted to and sky that didn't stop at the roofline. The only wrinkle? The property backed up to a gated subdivision called Silver Ridge Estates, a place so manicured it looked like it came with a dress code. But my deed was clear. This land was mine, free and unburdened by HOA commandments. That, as it turns out, made me a threat. There was a dirt road running through the far edge of my property, a dusty little shortcut connecting Silver Ridge to the county highway. The previous owner had let the neighbors use it out of kindness. I figured I'd do the same. Let them pass through. I didn't mind. But Clarissa did. Or, more accurately, Clarissa wanted that road to be hers, just like she wanted the color of my porch swing and the length of my weeds. Technically, that road falls under our emergency access plan, she said, like I'd just accidentally built a garage over a hospital wing. I told her politely that my survey and my eyes said otherwise. She nodded, lips pressed together, the kind of smile you see from someone who's already decided you'll be a problem. We'll need to clarify this with legal, she said. Robert scribbled something on his clipboard like a man writing down future regret. Later that afternoon, I met June Davison. She pulled up in a dusty Subaru with 24 eggs and a welcome smile. I figured you might need breakfast, she said. We sat on the back of my trailer with coffee mugs balanced on our knees, and she gave me the download. Clarissa wasn't just the HOA president. She was also the top seller agent in 3 counties, married to a man who silently partnered with a land development firm. She wants your road, June said, because she's betting on expansion. She's been trying to buy up land around here for years. You're not on her chessboard. You're the last square keeping her from checkmate. That got my attention. I'd seen plenty of power plays in corporate life, but this was different. This was polite. I didn't panic. I started planning. I walked every inch of my land with a map in one hand and a GoPro in the other. I set up cameras, backed up every deed and plat file to 3 cloud servers, and installed a weatherproof box just for documents, because sometimes justice starts with receipts. And the next morning, when Robert came walking down the edge of my field with a measuring wheel and no introduction, I didn't stop him. I filmed him. I waved. He didn't wave back. That was fine. I wasn't building fences yet, but I was setting lines. And I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be a misunderstanding. This was going to be a standoff, and I'd already started drawing blueprints for the long game. You ever wake up and feel like something's off before your feet even hit the floor? That was the morning I heard the hum of machinery at the edge of my property, right where the birds usually did the talking. I grabbed my coffee and binoculars, and sure enough, there they were, a crew setting posts like they were building the Berlin Wall. The fence was going up fast, tall, concrete, with steel reinforcements that looked better suited to a prison than a subdivision. I headed over, boots crunching on gravel, and asked the foreman what they were doing. Perimeter security, he said, flipping through a permit packet like I was the mailman, not the landowner. It was technically legal. They were building it just inside the HOA's boundary line. Legal? Maybe. Neighborly? Not even close. The message was clear. They couldn't own my land, so they'd try to box it in. That's when I realized I wasn't being fenced out, they were fencing themselves in. The kicker came later that afternoon when a nervous-looking contractor handed me a single silver key. "For the gate," he muttered. "Miss Pennington said to give it to you as a courtesy." I looked at the gate, heavy-duty, welded, with an industrial-grade lock blocking the same dirt road that the HOA had been so obsessed with. I turned that key over in my palm and laughed. Clarissa thought she'd checkmated me, but she'd just handed me the first real piece of leverage. That night, I swapped out their lock with my own. Top shelf, keyless, digital, and tied to a camera system with motion sensors and cloud storage. I added a sign that read, "Private Road, access by permission only." And then I built a simple website where authorized personnel, utility workers only, could request gate access with 24 hours notice. You know, just being neighborly. Of course, I double-checked the paperwork. Every easement, every boundary, every dotted I and crossed T. That's when I noticed a faint reference on one of the old plat maps to something labeled 10 PSF 47. It wasn't in any of the HOA's letters. It wasn't near my house, but I hiked out to the far edge of the property, and there it was. Half hidden behind some mesquite and brush, a squat, concrete pump house with a rusted sign that read, "Silver Ridge Water Authority." Bingo. A little utility easement tucked into the far corner of my land, long forgotten by everyone except the county's infrastructure records. I called my attorney, Martin, who nearly dropped his phone when I explained what I'd found. "Cow," he said, "that's the water distribution node for their entire subdivision, and according to this map, the only legal access runs straight through your road." If Clarissa's fence was her castle, she'd just walled off her own drawbridge. Now let's pause here and appreciate the irony. The HOA had spent months trying to force me under their thumb, letters, complaints, visits with measuring wheels. Then they built a fortress to shut me out, thinking it would isolate me. But in doing so, they locked themselves away from their own water lifeline. It was like watching someone board up their house and forget they left the dog inside. And the best part? By handing me that gate key and not documenting it correctly, they had acknowledged, however unintentionally, that I had control. It wasn't just symbolic, it was operational. The only thing I had to do was play it cool, follow the law, and wait. Nothing exposes power like turning off the faucet. The next Monday, right on cue, a white SUV rolled up to the gate and out came Clarissa in full regalia. Blazer, clipboard, sunglasses large enough to double as windshields. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, smiling like I was the lost puppy who'd finally come home, "we need to discuss immediate unrestricted access to this road for community safety and essential services." I took a sip of coffee and nodded toward the sign. "Already accounted for. There's a website, easy process, emergency access gets priority." Her smile flickered. "This is unreasonable. You're blocking critical infrastructure." I tilted my head. "No, Clarissa, you blocked it with a 6-foot fence. I'm just managing what you forgot to plan." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't have a move. Not a legal one. Not that day. And the real kicker? The utility company had already started using my system without issue. Sometimes, the best revenge is well-organized logistics. By the time she stormed off, Robert trailing behind like a man who'd just realized his GPS led him into a ditch, I knew we were past the first act. This wasn't about land anymore. It was about control. But they didn't understand what I did. You can control people with fear or favor, but if you try to control the one person who reads blueprints for fun and knows how systems fail, well, you'd better check your plumbing, because sooner or later the pressure builds. And trust me, eventually something's gonna burst. Stay tuned. The pipe's about to crack. Funny thing about control, it's not always about who yells the loudest. Sometimes it's about who has the valve. And in this case, Clarissa Pennington had fenced off her kingdom so tight she didn't realize she'd sealed off her own water supply and left me holding the only key. After my little courtesy system went live, I stuck to the rules like glue. Utility company? Access approved within minutes. Emergency? Gate opened faster than a Vegas slot machine. Clarissa? Well, she kept sending emails demanding round-the-clock open access for the good of the community, which I filed neatly under not my problem. She could scream about emergency preparedness all she wanted, but I'd built a legal, documented, fair legacy system, and the water company had zero complaints, unlike the neighbors who were about to discover what happens when HOA drama hits the plumbing. It started small. A few folks in Silver Ridge noticing lower water pressure during evening showers. Then, a lawn crew complained their sprinkler schedule got skipped. Nothing dramatic, just inconvenient. But inconvenience is where revolutions begin. Within a week, the water company sent out a blanket notice to the entire subdivision. Due to access limitations surrounding pump station WPS 47, delays in routine maintenance may cause periodic service disruption. The HOA wasn't named, and neither was I, but let's just say the fine print pointed in my direction. Clarissa, of course, tried to spin it. She called a community huddle at the clubhouse and declared the disruptions were due to external interference. She never said my name, but apparently my sign, my gate, and my website came up enough times to feel like a cameo, and that's when June gave me the update over peach cobbler and iced tea. "You've become the villain in Clarissa's fairy tale," she said, smirking. "But some of the villagers are starting to question the queen. Now, I'll admit, I didn't want their water to stop. I'm not cruel, I just didn't want to be trampled. The gate system worked fine, the delays were coming from the HOA's own design flaw, and deep down Clarissa knew it. But pride is a funny poison. It makes people double down on dumb like it's blackjack. I made a point to be helpful any time the utility techs came by. One guy, Louis, even started bringing donuts. "You're the easiest property I deal with," he told me one morning. "Half the time, it's gated communities that make us wait." I nearly spit my coffee. The irony was layered like a good lasagna. What Clarissa built to punish me had turned into the one choke point she couldn't bypass. And I just kept watering my tomatoes, checking my inbox and watching the pressure build, not just in the pipes, but behind those subdivision hedges. You could feel tension leaking out of Silver Ridge like steam from a cracked hose. Cars started slowing down near my gate. Some residents even started stopping by my roadside stand, buying eggs and honey like they were negotiating peace treaties. They'd peek at the sign, glance at the lock, and say things like, "You the guy with the website?" I'd nod, bag their vegetables, and let them figure out the rest. No lectures, no revenge, just silence and service. It drove Clarissa crazy. She needed me to be unreasonable, difficult, hostile, but I wasn't giving her a villain, just a neighbor with a legally sound gate and a perfectly cheerful tone. It's hard to accuse someone of sabotage when he's handing out zucchini and saying, "Bless your heart." Then came the leak. Not a metaphor this time. A real one. Somewhere inside the pump house, a pipe burst and water started pooling near the fence line. The utility crew needed immediate access to repair it before the entire system backed up into residential pipes. I got the emergency call at 6:12 a.m., approved the request by 6:13, and opened the gate from my phone at 6:14. When they arrived, Clarissa was already there in full makeup and meltdown mode. "This is a public safety crisis," she shouted at the foreman. "We need that gate permanently opened." The foreman, God bless him, just pointed to me and said, "He already opened it, ma'am. We're good." That's when it happened. Her mask cracked. For the first time, her eyes didn't have that rehearsed sparkle. They just looked cornered, like someone who brought a sword to a chess game and lost. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. I handed her a fresh access card, identical to the one taped on the gate, and said, "Anytime the utility company needs in, I'll be here." Her voice trembled as she took it. "This isn't over," she said, low and tight. I smiled back, polite as ever. "Of course not. But the water's flowing, isn't it?" She walked away, slower than usual, and Robert didn't even look at me. That was the moment I knew. Control doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It opens the gate early in the morning and lets the facts do the talking. They thought I was a bump in the road. Turned out I was the dam holding back their whole operation, and somewhere behind that tall concrete fence, people were starting to notice who was actually keeping the taps running. Stay with me. Because the next leak wasn't in the pipes. It was in her story, and it was about to flood the whole HOA. The woman who tried to gate me out now had to knock on my gate. I don't care who you are, that's a full circle moment. The leak at the pump station turned into a minor crisis. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to get folks' showers sputtering and lawn fountains coughing like a 2-pack-a-day smoker. Clarissa showed up flanked by Robert and a clipboard, trying to turn panic into pressure. "This proves we need that gate permanently unlocked," she declared, like it was a done deal. But the utility forewoman, a no-nonsense type named Rita, pointed out what I already knew. Access had been granted immediately, with full compliance. "Mr. Whitaker's system works fine," she said. "We had no delay." Clarissa's smile cracked like a porcelain plate under hot water. She wasn't looking for cooperation. She was looking for a villain. And I'd ruined her script by being too reasonable. Word traveled faster than fertilizer in spring. That evening, June showed up with lemon bars and a bigger scoop than a backhoe. "Half the community's whispering," she said. "The water thing, your gate, the emails Clarissa's been dodging." Turns out residents had questions Clarissa wasn't answering, like why the fence went up without a vote, why the HOA board meeting suddenly had no minutes, and why no one was told the pump station was technically on private land. It didn't take long for the stirrings to turn into strategy. A retired judge named Everett Baines, who lived 2 streets over from Clarissa, started asking the kind of questions that require a podium and a microphone. "We need an emergency community forum," he told June, who told me, without Clarissa in charge. Now that I had to see. 3 days later, I watched from my porch as Silver Ridge residents filed into the community center like parishioners headed for a reckoning. I wasn't invited, technically not part of the HOA, and happily so, but June promised a full report. When she called that night, her voice was giddy. "It was better than cable," she said. "Everett laid it all out. Your documentation, the access system, the water utility records." Then he asked why HOA funds were used for a fence that blocked critical infrastructure. According to her, Clarissa tried to blame the water issues on external interference, but the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. They'd seen the sign. They'd met me at my farm stand. One man even spoke up and said, "If this guy's so hostile, why is he selling me tomatoes and opening the gate faster than my Wi-Fi connects?" But the real crack came when someone, Jeffrey Lynn, former board member, stood up and mentioned a development group called Westerfield Holdings. "I used to get emails," he said. "Clarissa wanted us to make the neighborhood look more marketable. Now, I wonder if it was about more than curb appeal." The room turned. The HOA queen wasn't just losing the narrative, she was losing the floor. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She got defensive, loud, and then she said it. "If we don't expand Silver Ridge, property values will drop 30% when Westerfield breaks ground." The room went silent. Even Robert blinked like he'd just heard a dog talk. "What project?" someone asked. Clarissa paused, lips parted. Too late. The dam had burst. It's funny how fast a crown slips once people realize it was glued on. Over the next 48 hours, I saw more Silver Ridge residents in my driveway than I had in the entire month prior. Everett came by, hat in hand. "We'd like to hear your side directly," he said. I set up some folding chairs under the big oak tree and told the story from start to gate. The binder, the threats, the fence, the access system, the leak. I showed them the deed, the easement maps, the time-stamped approvals. No drama, no exaggeration, just the facts, with a few raised eyebrows and some well-placed sarcasm. They listened. Really listened. One woman said, "You've been more transparent than our board." Another asked if I'd consider helping review future infrastructure decisions. I laughed, but I saw it in their faces. They weren't just looking for a neighbor. They were looking for a grown-up. And maybe, just maybe, a little redemption. But the best part? This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth finding daylight, and a community realizing the difference between power and leadership. Stay with me, because truth's a funny thing. Once it leaks out, it doesn't go back in the pipe. and Clarissa's pipeline was about to collapse. Turns out, the biggest HOA violation was the HOA president herself. Clarissa's little outburst at the community forum about property values tanking if Silver Ridge didn't expand wasn't just a slip, it was a confession in heels. And once people smelled blood, they didn't just want answers, they wanted ledgers. June told me the next morning that Everett, the retired judge, had already pulled up property records tied to Westerfield Holdings. 2 names popped up in multiple deals, Clarissa Pennington and her husband, listed as consultants. It was like watching a magic trick unravel in slow motion. The HOA hadn't just been enforcing lawn height and mailbox color. They'd been funding the foundation for Clarissa's private land grab. She wanted my dirt road because it led to gold. And now the whole neighborhood knew it. By the end of the week, the Silver Ridge HOA board had called an emergency vote. This time, no pastels, no finger sandwiches, just hard questions and hard stares. Clarissa tried to spin it, said she was protecting future equity and ensuring community integrity, but the crowd had heard enough buzzwords to last a lifetime. Robert, once her right hand and human clipboard, stood off to the side with his arms crossed like a man watching his favorite movie get rebooted badly. When the final tally came down, it wasn't even close. Clarissa was voted out, stripped of her presidency and escorted out of the room by the same community she once ruled like a suburban monarch. No flowers, no plaque, just cold silence and a folding chair left behind. A few days later, Everett and Robert came to visit. This time with respect, not regulation. Robert looked 10 pounds lighter, like shedding Clarissa's shadow had taken actual weight off his spine. "Mr. Whitaker," Everett began, "on behalf of the newly formed interim board, we'd like to make this right." They slid a letter across my patio table, a formal acknowledgement that the road was my private property, that the gate management system was legal and effective, and that no further claims would ever be made to it by the HOA. But here's where it got interesting. They also offered a monthly stipend. "We'd like to compensate you for the ongoing use of your road for utility access," Robert added. "Think of it as a lease." I leaned back in my chair, let the breeze do the talking for a second. "You built a fence to push me out," I said. "I turned it into a toll booth." They chuckled. I didn't. I signed the agreement the next day. Not with glee, but with satisfaction. The kind that settles into your bones and doesn't need applause. The best part? I didn't have to move the fence. I didn't have to swing the gate open for every HOA whim. I just had to manage access fairly, which I'd been doing from day one. The website stayed, the signs stayed, but now, instead of HOA letters demanding compliance, I got monthly checks and polite requests from folks who finally understood what boundaries really meant. And the cherry on top? The board asked June to serve as secretary. A nod to her level head and good instinct. She accepted, of course. June had always been the quiet counterweight to Clarissa's noise, and now the community had realized the difference between leadership and loudness. And me? I stayed out of HOA politics. I had chickens to feed. But I can tell you this much. When people stop mistaking authority for entitlement, things start to change. Silver Ridge got quieter, fairer, more neighborly, and I got back to what I came here for: sunrise coffee, rows of vegetables, and a gate that only opens on my terms. Clarissa thought she could block me out with concrete and steel, but all she did was give me the chance to build something stronger. Respect. Stay close, because the final piece of this story isn't about fences, laws, or even money. It's about legacy and what happens when a man trades concrete for soil and finds more power in peace than he ever did in pressure. Every morning at 7 a.m., they call to ask for the key they tried to steal. It's always polite, sometimes from the HOA office, sometimes from a rotating list of maintenance staff, but every single time it starts with a request. That gate, once built to box me in, now opens at my say-so, and I don't say that with spite. I say it with peace. Because when you've lived through the noise and come out the other side with your land, your name, and your soul intact, you don't need to slam doors. You just keep the keys and use them wisely. Funny how something meant to block me out became the quietest symbol of control I've ever held. Simple, steel, and swinging on hinges I own. The ranch took shape like a slow sunrise, steady, golden, and earned. What started with a half-built chicken coop and a bucket of seed became a rhythm of seasons. I planted fruit trees that spring, peach, plum, fig, and a greenhouse the following fall. My hens multiplied like gossip, and soon I was selling eggs, jam, and heirloom tomatoes at the Saturday market. I added a small apiary, and the bees worked the wildflower field like union labor. June's kids pitched in too. Her son helped me build the raised beds, and her daughter named every chicken like they were royalty. One by one, neighbors came, not with clipboards or complaint forms, but with pie, zucchini, and curiosity. Turns out, the best HOA reform wasn't bylaws. It was compost, sunshine, and open conversations between people who remembered how to wave instead of point. And yes, even Clarissa's husband called once. It was a hot August morning, and the pump had tripped a breaker. His voice was tight and careful, like a man walking barefoot across gravel. "Mr. Whitaker, I wanted to request emergency access for the utility team." I paused, just long enough to make the silence feel earned. "Happy to help," I said cheerfully, unlocking the gate from my phone. No snark, no revenge, just a subtle reminder sometimes justice isn't loud. It's routine. It's a quiet man with a working system and a long memory. Clarissa? She sold her house and moved 2 counties away. Word is she's still selling real estate, under her maiden name. And me? I don't need to Google her. I just check my egg count and move on. Silver Ridge is different now. The board runs smoother, meetings are public, and nobody's trying to repave paradise with pressure tactics. Everett took over as HOA president, and June serves as secretary with her usual mix of patience and sharp observation. Robert surprisingly found his groove as head of emergency preparedness. Turns out he just needed a job with rules that actually helped people. The fence still stands, but it's no longer a wall. It's a boundary, defined, understood, and respected. That's the part people miss. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about showing where respect begins. That gate? It didn't divide us, it defined how we'd move forward. With consent, clarity, and a click of a button. If you're still listening, let me leave you with this. Document everything. Know your land, your laws, your leverage. Not to fight, but to stand. People will try to rattle your peace with forms, fear, or fences. Don't flinch. Patience beats panic. And sometimes the very thing they build to control you becomes the exact thing that frees you. They tried to bury me with rules. I built a farm from the dirt they threw. So if your story starts with a lock, a gate, or a threat in a pastel binder, smile. You just might be standing on the edge of something stronger than any board vote or bylaws. Your own land, your own terms, and your own quiet revolution. And that's how I won. Without shouting, without suing, without stepping off my land, not with anger, but with patience, not with revenge, but with proof, not by tearing down their gate, but by turning it into a reminder that real power doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to last. I didn't just keep my property, I kept my peace, my purpose, and eventually a community that learned the difference between control and respect. The chickens are still laying, the tomatoes are still ripening, and the phone still rings every morning at 7:00 a.m. A quiet little victory that never gets old. If there's one thing this story should tell you, it's this. Your voice matters most when it's backed by truth, calm, and paperwork. Boundaries are not just fences, they're declarations of who you are and what you stand for. Clarissa thought she was building walls. She was really building my legacy. One concrete post at a time. And the irony? The more she tried to bury me in HOA red tape, the deeper she dug the foundation for my farm, my family, and my future. So if you're facing something unfair, or if someone's trying to box you into a corner, remember this story. Know your rights, take your time, and don't be afraid to let quiet consistency do the heavy lifting. In the end, the truth doesn't knock. It opens its own gate. If you got something valuable from this story, if it made you laugh, made you think, or made you sit up and say, "That's exactly what I needed to hear," go ahead and drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Hit that like button so this story reaches someone else who might need it, and be sure to subscribe because we've got more real-life reckonings, poetic justice, and stories that hit home coming up next. This was the Gatekeeper's Gambit, and this time, the good guy kept the gate.